this new lecture on the 9th of May 2014. I would like to return on the question of Mars and Venus. As you probably know, if you have followed my line of lectures, I don't use those words, Mars and Venus, as referring to planets. They are just symbolic ways to characterize phases of a cycle which is by itself determined by Saturn and its connections consecutively to the four rule fixed stars, which are Aldebaran, Regulus, Antares, and Fomalhaut. And I don't know how much you use them in the road. Probably don't use them so much anyway. So, which is very practical, of course. Mars and Venus are the way I would qualify the ascending and the descending period of the seven-year cycle which I have created and recreated or restored, and that means that each of these periods will last around 2.5 years. The actual period of Venus ascending time will end in about 18 months or less, with possibly a period of transition which we cannot determine clearly, because everything is in a way rather progressive, but not that much. We are in a technical field, and it can be quite brutal in certain ways, like when you turn the light or etc. It's not a natural process. It's a process which obeys to very precise changes and to a certain clock. So it's a mistake to compare astrology to the natural processes, even if you can use them in a sort of illustration, but it's an illustration which has its limits. Astrology doesn't work as night and day, doesn't work as summer and winter. It's not exactly the same process. Like when we turn on the television, it's not like something which will appear progressively, or if it does, it's a matter of a few seconds. It's the same thing with the computer. And so, but on the other hand, you can compare in a way Venus. You can connect Venus and Jupiter on one side, and Mars and Saturn on the other side. As you know, in the tradition, Venus and Jupiter were considered as good planets, fortunate planets, and Mars and Saturn as bad planets, unfortunate planets. And this is more or less what I think here. But it's a matter of point of view, angle. So what I would like to underline is that for me the major question an astrologer has to learn and to apply is a distinction between the time of Venus and the time of Mars, and especially get rid of false representations about Mars. As you probably know, Mars is very often connected with the spring, with the beginning of things, because it has a sort of energy, etc., etc. Like also it is connected with the sign of Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac. I think this is very dangerous to think that way, and I believe that Mars, on the contrary, belongs to the second part of the year, belongs to autumn and winter, and Scorpio and Sagittarius are signs which have sort of arrow, and the arrow is a good expression of Mars. So let's forget about Mars and the spring, Mars and Aries. Unless you accept the idea which I've developed that Aries is not the first sign zodiac, but the last sign zodiac, and that the first sign zodiac will be Taurus. Well, we will not come back on that, but in the Indian tradition there is this idea. So we have to rebuild the image of Venus and rebuild the image of Mars if we want to make good astrology. Venus is, I like the idea of the V of Venus, like the V of vital, and the V, which is a U also, the U of unity. But in fact, Venus is to be connected with freedom. The refusal of any frontiers, any limits, any delimitations is Venetian. While Mars, on the contrary, is a respect of strict respect of what has been decided, what are the lines, what are the laws, and Mars is applying very strictly the law. Dura lex sed lex is the Latin proverb, adage. And the first signs, like it has something natural, you know. The Taurus, the Gemini, it's just a couple. They are just together. They kiss each other. While Sagittarius corresponds to something much more elaborate technically. It's something which is not in ourselves. An arrow, an arc is not something we have in ourselves. It's something we build from trees, from nature. And any weapon is also something we take from outside. So Mars will introduce something from outside. In fact, Mars and Venus is also the dialectic between Proserpine and Pluto. So we can connect, in fact, all the planets, all the gods to this major axis, which is Mars and Venus. And Pluto will, as a god, correspond to the winter, and Proserpine to summer, including Ceres and Corey. And I pass on the Greek translations. And so Venus is not necessarily refusing war. War is not the right word, and in fact, as we know, there are all sorts of wars. There are civil wars, and there are international wars. There are independence war, and there are wars of conquest. And I would say that Venus is more a war of conquest. It has a dynamic of conquest. Because conquest, what does it mean? To conquer a place like Saddam Hussein did with Kuwait 20 years ago, is a fact of refusing the frontier, refusing the status quo, refusing the armistice, refusing the contract, the treaty. And Venus is perfectly capable of refusing that. And we see that with Putin, who is in fact here is acting as a Venusian, as strangely and as paradoxically as it would seem, by refusing and reconsidering the frontier between Russia and Ukraine, and requiring the return of Crimea to Russia or something assimilated to that, etc., including also other parts external to Russia, but which welcome a lot of Russian-speaking people. And in period of Venus, we have to be ready for this sort of event. That is, I don't want any limits. I don't want to be limited by any program or any agreement of the past, any engagement which might have been made before I live now. It's a realpolitik, and this is Venus. It is Venus, and this is, as I said, Jupiter. That is expansion, in a natural way, I would say. Natural expansion. Something which goes by itself. Like making love. It's also something natural, and it doesn't need any machine to work. Like sport. Vis-à-vis films and theatre, which are more Martian in a way, where there are laws and everything has to be done as been written on the program, on the partition, on the board, etc. Mars has something very much connected with what has been already settled, and he has to impose the respect of what has been settled, installed, decreed. And so the Venusian Jupiterian is someone who lives in the present and tries to take the best from the present opportunities and circumstances. And he doesn't want to have he wants to have his hands free to be able to have the best maneuver possible. On the contrary, the Martian person, and this is more or less connected with what I call the woman, like Venus is a man, which is also something which is sometimes difficult to accept. The Martian type is much more concerned by fixing things, making things clear once for all, closing the subject. Everything has to be settled once for all. And also, it has to be written down, it has to be, it uses a technique, even if it's just a technique of writing on a piece of paper. It's already something which is not necessarily human. It's something external to the human nature and which interferes with our lives. Mars uses what is external to human nature. And from this point of view, Mars is not human. And all the laws are in some way not human, inhuman. But in fact, this is a question which is not yet totally solved. People do not behave the same way according to the period. So they don't expect the same things from the others. For instance, a woman will expect from a man that he be Venusian in a Venusian time and Martian in a Martian time. When I say that, it doesn't mean consciously, but subconsciously. She doesn't have to know what is Mars and Venus and Mars in relation to Venus in periods, but somewhere she receives signals from the sky which tells her that now is the time of Venus or now this is the time of Mars. And she will, in a certain way, expect from the man to be Venusian or to be Martian. So when he is to be Venusian, he has to show his freedom of action. In France, for instance, today we have problems with the credibility of the government, and one of the major arguments against the government and against the president, Hollande, is that he's promising things that he cannot confirm or respect, and he gives quantities, the percentages, dates, delays, which you will not be able to respect either. Which means that in a way, we don't want him to work as a Martian, because we are not in a Martian period. And you should be freer of these actions and say, well, I will do what I can, I will do my best, but I cannot give such precisions in times or in results. I will use the best means that I can have, and I will act in the best interest of the group I represent. This is more or less what Putin says, on the contrary. So politicians are better to be in phase, to be in harmony with the period, which is given by the 7 years cycle. So, as a matter of fact, I would like to pass to the question of men and women, because this question is obviously essential in psychology, and since astrology has to do with psychology, and since astrology has a lot to do with telling people who they are, and what they can do, it is something you cannot ignore. So, to say that a woman is Martian is, of course, a little surprising, but this shows, according to me, that we have wrong representations of genders. And this is because we have wrong representations of gender that some people deny that they are gender. That's very simple. A wrong representation, a wrong definition leads to the refusal of the definition itself, of the principle itself of making a difference, establishing a difference. This is going too far. Saying that men are Venusians only means that they are made. They are not made to work according to two strict lines, or to follow a too strict a mission, or to be concerned by a too specific profession or activity. They like to enlarge their prospects, and they like to explore various sectors and territories. While women, according to me, are Martians because they like to have rails, I would say, like a railway. They like to follow rails, they like to act according to the book, always something which is external and which is imposed from outside, like even the law is imposed from outside or from the sky, which is believe in God, etc. So women refer to external powers, external tools, while men refer to internal. And the passage, in fact, even if you follow the cycle of seasons, you see that. In summer and spring, we just eat things which are fresh, which are just ready. And when we pass to the autumn and winter, we prepare all sorts of products which are to be preserved and conserved and kept in boxes, like sausages, like jams, like all sorts of cereals, and many things you can keep for a long time. Mars will be able to keep things for a long time, and actually refrigerators are best, or freezers are machines which permit to keep things for a long time. While the world of Venus is much more natural. You have to eat what exists now. You you hunt beasts, you collect a fruit. It's something which is just given to you freely. You don't have to build anything. It's not. There is no machine. And even if you take fruits, the fruits will reappear later on next year. It's not something which is dead. It's something which you don't take the capital. You just take the dividends and the interest. So mentalities are very different. In order to be a great leader, you have to be a Venusian and not a Martian. A leader is someone who can do what he wants, who can impose his own will, who has nothing to fear or to respect, apart from the fact that he has to be victorious, efficient, and realistic. If you go downwards in the social scale, you will find people who are much more limited in their activities, in their competences, and who cannot supervise a great deal of things, a great array of things. Gauquelin, as a matter of fact, in his work, in his statistical work, has been studying the feminine astrology. This is astrology where people are divided into 5 groups, and each group corresponds to a specific function in society. This is very typically Martian. Why? Because precisely astrology is Martian, not Venusian. This is a very important point. The man who doesn't know astrology, when there is no astrology, is in Venus. And as a matter of fact, people have discovered Venus a long time before Mars. Venus was very, very, very early known, and because it was coming after or before the Sun, while Mars was totally free of circulation, and it's a planet, and planets have been discovered a long time ago, a long time afterwards. The proof is that in the Bible, in the Genesis, you mention the light, you mention the star, but you don't mention the planet. And Venus, in a certain way, is a part of the word, as Mercury also, of the word of the Sun. They are part of the Sun, so they are never very far from the Sun in the chart. It's a matter of elongation. 48 degrees for Venus and 28 degrees for Mercury from the Sun, maximum. So, Gauquelin has described this sort of astrology, but it is true that astrologers are not necessarily to be in favor of astrology. They have to study it, like people who struggle against cancer have to study cancer. But an astrologer is not necessarily an advocate of astrology, especially in a Venusian period. Venusian period is the end of, it's a sort of parenthesis, it's a sort of truce, T-R-U-C-E, of intermezzo, interlude. When Mars is astrology, and when Mars is stopped in its process, we are getting out of astrology in a certain way. Although astrology will finally define the time of Venus, but the time of Venus is non-astrological. The time of Venus is a refusal of frontiers, of types, of categories, of any sort of limitations. And this is a paradox, because precisely the cycle of Saturn, when Saturn arrives to the conjunction with one of the 4 fixed stars, is a sign that we do not belong to astrology. And when Saturn transits one of the 4 fixed stars, or fixed stars, this is a sign of a return to the astrological dependence and power. which is the time of Mars. So astrology itself organizes its own dialectic, its own contradictions. Astrology, in fact, bizarrely, paradoxically, conjunction tells us, but it is a matter of interpretation, in fact. Everything in astrology is a matter of interpretation, because the conjunction is also the beginning of the period of Mars. So we can discuss that. We can discuss, there are several possibilities of reading the sky. One of them is, Saturn is approaching one of the stars, so we are in a Venusian time. But we can also say that we are in a Venusian time until Mars will pass the star. And when Saturn passes the star, one of the four stars, then starts the time of Mars. And when Saturn is very far from the fixed stars, then starts the Venusian period, which is precisely a period of eclipse of the strength of Mars and the eclipse of the astrology itself. So I really think that this is a better interpretation, to be coherent. It is a conjunction of Saturn with one of the stars, which starts the process of Mars, which starts the process of astrology, and it is the distance of Saturn to the increasing distance of Saturn to one of the fixed stars, which will start the time of Venus. So Venus, in this way, is the time when Mars is weak. When the Mars is weak, then men are free of doing what they want. And sometimes, of course, we could call it, if we use a Freudian vocabulary, that Mars is an over-ego, and Venus is the that or S or something like that. So it's not surprising that we have this drama in Ukraine with someone like Putin, who suddenly doesn't want to respect his word, doesn't want to respect frontiers. He feels he is totally free of doing what he wants. And this will be possible until Saturn reaches the conjunction with Antares at the beginning of Sagittarius, 9 degrees of Sagittarius, which is not exactly now, but which will occur in about 18 months. At this moment, the leaders who have been neglecting, ignoring the laws, the engagement, the treaties, will be unable to pursue in this direction. They will not continue to act without being punished and sanctioned by law, by anything else. But for the time being, the Venusian time doesn't afford the law to be applied strictly, and it is better to exploit this period of freedom in order to get rid of certain frameworks and certain constraints and rules, because sometimes those rules are exaggerated. And the European election that we are going to have in a few days in Europe, at the end of the month, May, will probably give a certain strength to the groups which want more freedom for the states and consider Europe, the Commission of Brussels, as Martian, as imposing its laws, and this is not the time for that. So when you are in a period of Venus, it is not well advised to speak the language of Mars. And when you are in a period of Mars, it is not a good point to speak the language of Venus.